In the spring of 1241, Europe believed it was safe. Its castles stood, its kings ruled, its armies waited. They were wrong. On this channel, we examine moments when history balanced on a narrow edge, not through legends or heroes but through systems, decisions, and discipline. Stories where outcomes felt inevitable only in hindsight. This is one of those moments. This story is not just about the Mongol invasions of Europe, it is about why Europe did not fall. Because in the 13th century the most effective military system on Earth reached the borders of a divided continent and then stopped. The question is not how the Mongols won, it is why they did not finish the job. To understand how close Europe came to collapse, we must step far away from Europe itself. The Mongol Empire did not begin as an empire, it began as a solution. On the harsh grasslands of the Eurasian steppe, survival demanded constant movement, ruthless efficiency, and absolute loyalty. There were no walls, no cities to defend, no harvests to protect, only speed and adaptation. Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, did not conquer by chance. He organized chaos into a system. Tribes were broken and reassembled. Command was earned, not inherited. Orders were clear, brutal, and enforced without exception. By the early 1200s, this system had outgrown the steppe. The Mongols did not fight wars the way their enemies understood war. They did not seek glory. They did not chase decisive battles for honor. They sought destruction and resistance. Cities that surrendered were spared. Cities that resisted were erased. The message traveled faster than the armies themselves. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, the empire did not fracture, it expanded. His successors understood something critical. Momentum was power. Each generation pushed outward, not randomly, but methodically. China was subdued. Central Asia was crushed. The Islamic world was fractured and burned. And then, almost unnoticed at first, the Mongol gaze turned west. Europe, at this time, was not a unified civilization. It was a patchwork of kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, and feudal obligations. Loyalty was personal. Authority was layered. Coordination was rare. Wars in Europe were ritualized. Seasons mattered. Campaigns paused for winter. Supply lines were short. Battles were set pieces. The Mongols did not recognize these rules. By the 1230s, Mongol scouts had already crossed into Eastern Europe. They mapped rivers, measured roads, observed armies without engaging them. This was not invasion. This was preparation. The first warning came from the east and Europe ignored it. The Rus principalities fell one by one. Kiev, once a center of Eastern Slavic power, was reduced to ruins in 1240. Its walls meant nothing. Its armies broke. Still, Western Europe believed distance was protection. They believed the Mongols were a local disaster, a barbarian storm that would exhaust itself. They did not understand the system moving toward them. The real invasion began in 1241, and it began with precision. The Mongol army did not advance as a single mass. It split. One force moved into Poland, another into Hungary, a third remained in reserve. This was deliberate. Europe's strength lay in its knights, heavily armored, shock-focused cavalry. The Mongols understood this. They had studied it. At the Battle of Legnica, Polish and German forces assembled hastily. They believed numbers and courage would suffice. The Mongols disagreed. They feigned retreat. They stretched the battlefield. They isolated units, then they destroyed them. The battle ended not in chaos but in silence. European command collapsed before it could adapt. Days later, the main Mongol force struck Hungary. At the Battle of Mohi, King Belafor gathered one of the largest armies Europe had assembled in decades. He fortified his camp. He prepared for a frontal assault. The Mongols did not attack the camp. They crossed rivers at night, built bridges under fire, encircled the position. When they struck, it was from all sides. The Hungarian army disintegrated, not because it lacked bravery, but because it faced a system designed to dismantle armies. Within months, Hungary lay open. Cities burned. Fields were empty. Refugees fled west. For the first time, Europe felt fear without distance. The Mongols did not stop at victory. They wintered in Europe. This alone shattered expectations. European warfare paused in winter. The Mongols adapted. They hunted, they moved, they planned. By early 1242, nothing stood between the Mongol armies and the heart of Europe. Vienna was vulnerable. Northern Italy was fractured. The Holy Roman Empire was divided by internal conflict. There was no unified response. And yet the invasion halted, not slowed. Not defeated, halted. The moment Europe remembers as survival was, in reality, a pause born far away. In December of 1241, Genghis Khan, ruler of the Mongol Empire, died. Mongol law demanded that all princes return to participate in the election of a new great Khan. Commanders in Europe received the news months later. They faced a dilemma: continue west and risk political isolation at home, or withdraw, preserving legitimacy, unity, and future campaigns. This was not hesitation, it was discipline. The Mongol system valued continuity over impulse. No general, no matter how successful, was above the structure, so the armies withdrew, not in defeat. In order, Europe interpreted this as salvation, but the truth was more unsettling. The Mongols had not reached their limits. Europe had not repelled them. There was no decisive resistance that forced retreat. The invasion ended because the system required it. This realization haunted European leaders, because if the Mongols returned united, focused, uninterrupted, Europe would not survive the same way twice, and for decades, that possibility remained real. European states adapted, castles were redesigned, stone replaced wood, urban defenses were expanded, communication improved, coalitions became more practical, fear reshaped policy. Meanwhile, the Mongol Empire evolved. Internal politics grew complex, succession disputes multiplied, priorities shifted east and south. Europe was spared not by strength alone but by timing. The Mongol invasions of Europe ended without a final battle. No climactic stand, no triumphant defense. Instead, they ended with absence. Burned lands slowly recovered. Kings returned to thrones that had nearly vanished. Chronicles framed survival as divine intervention. But beneath the relief lay a deeper transformation. Europe learned that wars were not guarantees, that courage without coordination failed, that systems mattered more than individual valor. The Mongols, for their part, demonstrated something rare in conquest: restraint enforced by law. They did not overextend. They did not fracture discipline for immediate gain. And because of that, their shadow lingered far longer than their presence. The Mongol invasions forced Europe into modernization earlier than it intended. Military architecture changed permanently. Diplomacy shifted toward alliances. Intelligence and reconnaissance gained value. The idea of total war, systematic, relentless, planned, entered European consciousness, and the Mongols became something more than invaders. They became a warning, not of brutality, but of efficiency, of what happens when discipline outpaces tradition, when systems outthink pride. Europe did not fall in 1241, but it understood, for the first time, that it could have. History often remembers victories, but survival can be just as transformative. The Mongol armies turned back, not because they were stopped, but because the world they built demanded patience. And Europe lived with the consequences of that restraint for centuries. If you want to explore more moments where history nearly broke, moments shaped by decisions rather than destiny, let us know what story should come next. And if this story held you until the end, consider liking the video and subscribing, because the most important battles are often the ones that never finish.